Good morning, everyone, again. My name is Dale Caldwell. I have the honor of really being the MC throughout the program today. I want to welcome you to the first Invisible Wounds Conference. And we really came up with this idea just a few months ago. Seems like it. A few months ago. And the idea is that this will hopefully be a conference that we do throughout the world over a series of these and have an annual one here. So you're part of history here. You're part of history to really make this idea. Give yourselves a round of applause. This idea of trauma being a real part of life that's often overlooked. So with that, I want to start with our host. And so we're here at Rutgers Newark, a university that I know very, very well. And they've been so incredibly gracious and really helping us get this inaugural conference off the ground in a few months. We're about to introduce one of my mentors and friends. But before, we'd like to begin with a video. So if you could turn your attention to the monitors.
I chose Rutgers Newark because it is really the only program like this in the country.
It is the most diverse campus in the country.
When you become a part of this Rutgers Newark campus, you really become a citizen of the world.
Different people from different cultures, different places, different countries, and there's just so much opportunity.
And I think it's really cool to see people from all over the world coming to one university to learn and grow. We need to be able to understand these different cultural barriers to be successful in any kind of line of work we'll do.
I've heard so many great things about the Rutgers community, and being part of it has made me realize just how great Rutgers is.
Rutgers really allows a student to grow and develop on a time and in a time frame that fits their schedule, fits their needs. It's really a testament to the high caliber professors and staff and faculty that are here at Rutgers Newark.
There are people all around the world who carry that Rutgers name, and to have that name with you just really connects you to more people than you could ever really imagine.
Please give Rutgers a round of applause, please. I now have the honor to introduce someone who's been a friend, a mentor, who she'll deny it, but many believe is the heart and soul of the Rutgers Newark campus. She's been here through many different chancellors, and so Diane Hill, Dr. Diane Hill, would you come on up, please?
Thank you, Dale. He's my mentor, too. We mentor each other. Well, first of all, let me just say, welcome to Rutgers University. That's what we're doing here. Isn't it amazing? Rutgers is an amazing place, and there's so many new things happening. So first of all, I want to say on behalf of our Chancellor, Nancy Cantor, we are very excited to host this, and we are not only pleased to host this, but we want you to know that this conference is very, very important because it is addressing some very important issues that touch many of the lives, so many lives, not only in Greater Newark, but when we look at this from a state perspective, when we look at it from a national perspective, this is important. Isn't it important to you? It is. And as an anchor institution, we are committed to help and build strong, healthy communities. And for many of you, you can see that in our strategic plan. So it is even outlined in our plan that we are committed to working and collaborating to build strong, healthy communities, not only in our own backyard, which we are obligated to do that, and we should be. I was born and raised in Newark. We owe that to this community. But more so, globally, from a global perspective. And so our students, our faculty, are all involved in many engagement activities, initiatives, and programs. And I would say visit our website to learn so many more that many of you can get involved with. But this could not happen without our community partners. It could not happen without our alumni, like Victor. Where's Victor? Wave your hand, because you know Victor's alum. But Victor isn't the only alum here. Alum, stand up and show them that you're in the house. Don't we have a few more Rutgers alums here? I know Michael's standing there. I see you. Wave your hands, Rutgers alums. Let them know you're in the house. That's right. And you see how important it is for us that our alums are part of this process. But not just our alums. You know, we have some of our students. Any of our students here, raise your hand, wave a little bit. I see some of our students are here. Isn't that amazing? But then we have another group. And this is, to me, one of the most important groups. And this group is our community partners. Many of our community partners that are out there doing the work, that are collaborating with us, could you just wave your hand and stand up? Because community partners, without you, we can't do it without United Way. We can't do it without where is Miss Wilhelmina Holder, who is holding down the fort in the community, and so many others that are here. And, you know, without you, these types of programs and collaborations don't work, because I know that today you're going to hear from a collection of experts, our faculty, staff, and some of the people that this organization has brought in for you to hear, and these practitioners who will surely enlighten all of us, and they're going to help us to better understand and collectively address solutions. So let's thank our host again today, because without them having this vision, it wouldn't be happening here today. So let's thank our host. And again, I want to thank all of you for being here today, and I hope you enjoy your day. And again, welcome to Rutgers University. Thank you.
Now, this wouldn't have happened without some tremendous sponsors, and we're going to talk right now about our lead sponsors, but throughout the day, we're going to recognize some additional sponsors. First, we have some folks here, and so during the breaks and other times, we encourage you to reach out to our sponsors, talk to them about what they're doing in this area, and really get to know them and figure out maybe there's a way that we can partner. So everyone knows, you know, the company that's most associated with Newark, Prudential. Prudential has been a lead sponsor, and please give them a round of applause. This also wouldn't have happened without Alpha STEM. Alpha STEM is yet another organization that is committed to everything we're talking about today. Give them a round of applause. And our third sponsor that you'll hear more about, DAV, is another organization that's deeply in this space, and you'll hear from the founder later. So give them a round of applause. I have an opportunity now to introduce someone, unfortunately via video, who I've known for a long time, long before he was mayor of Newark and a U.S. senator. I remember I was executive director of Newark Alliance. I remember teaching him that there are 21 neighborhoods in Newark and other things. And so Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker, would have loved to be here. He just can't be here today, but he was nice enough to put together a video that we'll show right now.
Thank you for allowing me a few moments to share with you, but profoundly thank you for being here today, for your purpose, for your gathering. I want to acknowledge the other speakers, extraordinary, committed people. Sergeant Mayer, thank you for your incredible service. Kristen Tugman, thank you for your focus and your work. And Chris Krieger, I just want you to know I'm so grateful for your organization and for your leadership. Most of all, I just want to thank you all for evidencing truly what patriotism means. I want to thank you for understanding that so many of our honored men and women who have gone overseas to serve us often come back with wounds that are both visible and invisible. We as a community need to do so much more when it comes to understanding the impact that post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries are having on our military men and women and their families and their communities. We have an obligation to do more, to recognize the problem and be there to address it. We know that we have a nation that seems to come up with the resources, attention, and money often to send our men and women overseas to serve us, to sacrifice for us. But we need to be a nation that does more for our veterans when they come home. This is why from the time when I was mayor, putting the first City Hall one-stop center for veterans to my time as senator working on veterans issues every single week, we have to continue to be a nation focused on empowering the people who have done so much for us. Patriotism isn't just about our pledges to the flags or the national anthem. It's not just songs and salutes. It must be our actions and our commitment. Thank you all for coming together in this gathering, for your commitment to our country and our countrymen and women who've done so much to honor us. I give you my gratitude and my encouragement. Let us continue to live up to the ideals of our nation and to show them in how we treat people who have wounds, both visible and invisible, in the cause of our country. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me a few moments.
As you can see, Corey is on the cover of the latest PTSD Journal, which is really the founder of this conference. Encourage you to take it home, but also please mention this to people that you work with. We want this magazine to be in every hand possible, so please make sure to do that. Now, Corey and I used to joke, when I get my hair cut, we look like long-lost brothers. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today. So our hope today is to really provide you with additional information, but also to get you thinking differently about the issue, but also ways to deal with the issue. So we start out with a domestic violence panel, which I'll introduce very, very shortly. Then we're going to have an urban trauma panel, and then a military adjustment panel. And I have a series of questions for the panelists, but we encourage you to ask some questions because you are our audience. This is for you. We want you to walk away with information that you can take back to your place of work and community organizing and really make a difference. So with that, I'd like to ask the domestic violence panelists to come up. Then we're going to show a video, which I'll describe a little bit later. So Ron Blake, who is an activist, domestic violence activist. Ron, would you come up? And one of the things that I want to do is, instead of me giving a long introduction, I want them to introduce and tell their story because they're incredibly powerful stories. This is an amazing group of panelists, and we're just so honored to have them here. Dr. Leanne Bruce, the National Program Manager of the Intimate Partner Violence Assistance Program. Leanne, if you could come up. Jillian Bullock, a filmmaker who will be showing her film in a little bit. And Cynthia Walker, the founder of Start Out Fresh Intervention Advocates. Sophia, if you would come up. Let's give them a round of applause. Each of them has an intimate connection with this topic. And so now we're going to show a film by Jillian Bullock. A warning, there's graphic content. So if you're uncomfortable with that, please excuse yourself. But it's a powerful film. That graphic content is really about the issue. And I don't know if you want to say something real quick or.
Actually, it's a trailer. It's not the whole movie.
Oh, okay,
it's just a trailer. But it's a movie I write. I'm the writer, director, and producer of it. It's about military sexual assault, post-traumatic stress disorder, and veterans who come back home and how they have to try to deal with that. And, every year, is 26,000 military men and women are sexually assaulted. So this is obviously something that should not be happening in our military. I'm a veteran myself, so I did serve. So I've seen it firsthand, unfortunately, to a lot of people. So that's why I wanted to do this type of film and get the information out to people. So this is just a trailer. It's like 2 minutes to introduce it. The film will be out next year in theaters, so everybody can go see it.
Let's run the trailer.
In the last 2 months, I've lost 7 veterans suffering from PTSD. 3 men, 4 women.
I'm sorry. The pain you're going through.
They're the ones in pain. Each day, 22 veterans commit suicide. And I pray to God to help me help them. But I get so exhausted at times. I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to save them. She was calling out for help because she was in so much pain. And that's where we come in. We have to be there for her.
Everyone's got a story, memories that could tear us down. But we each have to hold our own in this battleground.
I want a discharge.
What I know is that I won't be beaten. I will not.
I miss Mom so much, Dad.
No, I'll fight till I know I'm home bound.
Angela?
So I'm asking you to stay with me until the morning comes.
I don't think I can do this. It's too painful.
Because it's only then that I'll be down.
I was raped by my commanding officer.
How could you do something so cowardly?
Things just got out of hand. I was drunk. Hey, ladies.
I saw what you did to her.
Thank you for sharing that powerful trailer. And so before we begin, one of the reasons I was asked to do this is that I have a framework on influence. I wrote this book on influence called Intelligent Influence, and what I realized is that all that exists is influence. And so as we go through today, we need to understand that we're all the same, but our influences are different. And so as we talk about some of the very powerful and moving and challenging things that we're going to talk about today, we understand that the people who've gone through that are no different than you or I. It's just that their influences have helped to change and transform their lives. And the good news is that the right kinds of positive influences can actually transform people's lives back. So that's what this is about. We're about hearing to some challenging stories, but to begin to have a discussion about how do we move forward and make a difference. And so with that, why don't we start with, Ron, why don't we start with you?
My journey, it's very quixotic, very unusual.
I'm sorry, if you could talk into the mic, what we're doing is we're videotaping this, and the video hopefully will go around the world. So it goes directly to the video. So if you could talk into the mic when you speak. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
But yeah, just a very unusual journey for me. It began several years ago. I was in my home in downtown Phoenix. I have a 7th-floor loft, and that night I was woken up. There were 3 guys that came into my home that night, and I was held down and sexually assaulted. The details are horrific of what happened. One of those 3 people was my domestic partner of almost a decade. They were all drunk. 2 of them presented as though they were on a lot more than alcohol. And it was horrific. I mean, I almost lost my life on a 7th-floor balcony waiting for the police to arrive. Thanks. So at that moment, I mean, it started my journey spiraling downward. And then fast forward until 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, it was November of 2015, I got very suicidal on a night. And on that night, there was what I tell everybody, it was a moment of laughter, changed everything. I happened to be watching The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and I laughed. And I told people, a lot of people, I did a TED Talk and explained to people that wasn't the moment that saved my life, the fact that I laughed. It's the fact that I paused that TV show at that moment. And I sat there for about 3 minutes by myself and said, I'm doing something with this laughter. And at that moment, as I sat there, I said, I'm going to get on this TV show. And I had a purpose, and I decided I would do something. And it was very selfish at the time. I needed a purpose to keep going. And I built out from that. And the next day, I was at a Staples store in Central Phoenix. I was buying paper for something else. I still had hope from that night before. But I happened to walk by these giant foam poster boards, and I stood in front of them, and this lady came up and said, can I help you? And I said, do you have more of these in the back? And she said, let me go check. How many do you want? And that was my aha moment. I said, all of them. And I decided, I have some now here, but these are smaller ones. The ones I usually carry around are 4 times this size. Wow. And I have now 340 of those that people around the country have signed and supported my efforts to not just get on the show, but like I said, it started off very selfish of me to have this journey where I would go up and engage with strangers. But what I learned is on this journey, as I've traveled around the country for 695 days, people started sharing their stories back with me. And a lot of psychologists said, the reason is because you're vulnerable. And so on these 340 giant foam poster boards, I've met just about 23,000 strangers around the country that have shared their stories. I've met over 1,000 people that have shared their personal stories of sexual assault and rape with me, hundreds more with PTSD, domestic, I mean, you name it. It's just, and they'll put their stories on these boards oftentimes, but it's not sad. A lot of the media asked me, they said, isn't that one of the saddest things you can imagine? I said, no. I mean, I'm here today, 695 days into this. It's been a year since I've taken any psych meds, any sleeping pills. I've been able to pull off of those. A year ago, I got married. I met somebody on my journey, and we got married. I've started getting back to work, but I like to share this because it's you guys. Like right now, you guys are listening to me. I don't know if you guys know how powerful that is. When I go out and talk to these thousands, tens of thousands of people around the country, they have told me they just want somebody to listen, and they feel like I'm listening, and I am listening. And for me, like when I'm telling this story, I found my journey back to healthy, and I'm trying to help a lot of other people find their journey. And part of that is when I was on the plane coming here yesterday, people were passing this around the plane. Flight attendants were signing. People were asking me questions. I mean, I can only take these on the airplanes.
Right.
The boards I have are much bigger, but these are actually from a couple years ago around the holiday season. That's why they're decorated with red and green. But it's absolutely stunning. As I went to bed last night, I was reading some of the messages people put, and it doesn't matter if I'm in New Jersey, New York, if I'm in California, if I'm in Texas, the stories are the same. It's just geographically, people will put something on here that they want me to remember them by. So it's just, if you guys ever want to know anything, just ask me, because I've learned from all of you guys, tens of thousands of you guys. So I have a lot of stories to share, a lot to tell you about. Yeah, and someday, too, I told the media, I do want to get on the Late Show. And it's sort of weird to think that I'm across the river, is it called?
Right.
The Late Show. Tomorrow I may go to the Late Show, and because that's a symbolic goal for me.
Yeah.
Somebody said, what if I get to introduce you to Stephen Colbert? That's great, but my goal was to get on his show somehow.
Wonderful.
Just like if somebody wants to climb Mount Everest, do not try to get that person to climb K2 or Kilimanjaro.
Right.
They're climbing Mount Everest. And there was something symbolic, and a lot of people are following my journey. So anyway, sometimes people miss that and think that's all about my journey is to get on that show. It's not.
Right.
And I learned that on this journey. And if you guys ever want to watch the TED Talk I gave, you'll see it's much more than that.
Well, Ron, thank you for sharing, and thank you and all that you're doing to help people tell their stories. Really appreciate that. Why don't we just go down? Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Leanne Bruce. I am the Intimate Partner Violence Program Manager for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I've been in this role since January, so I still feel very new to this role, and it's still very overwhelming to me when I think about the scope of what we're trying to do in the VA for our veterans and their families and our staff members. But being in this room this morning with all of you all, meeting the people I've been able to meet so far, I want to meet all of you. The energy in this room makes me feel so much more optimistic that we can really do what our mission states is to end intimate partner violence. It takes a village, it takes all of us, and it takes us attacking it from a lot of different vantage points. But to go back a little bit, my story is I'm a social worker. And in every capacity I have ever worked in my entire career, I have dealt with intimate partner violence, family violence, neglect, domestic violence, and so forth, starting out in working with school system and with children. So my career has run the gamut of working with families. I then started working way back, right after the beginning of the Iraq conflict. I started working with military families. And that was my aha moment in many ways in my career, because I was working mostly with children who were buckling under the pressure of what was going on in the family. And I started seeing a lot of things of what the pressure that our veterans and their families go through. The veterans serve, the families serve. It affects them, it affects their sphere, it affects our society in so many ways. And so I dedicated my life and career to working with families and to try to help support those who are supporting us and protecting us. And I saw what they go through. And so my career has taken me through a trajectory of working with substance abuse, behavioral health, family advocacy, And so the road has led me to where I am today in working with our veterans. For about 5 or 6 years, I worked with veterans who were in our Warrior Transition Battalion. I was a VA representative, and I helped them make that transition and just saw so much of, you were talking about the invisible wounds of PTSD, the invisible wounds of traumatic brain injury. That's what we're here to talk about. But there's so many layers that go so deep, all the way into more injuries to the soul, or the moral injury we hear about today, that really talks about this person who is broken at the core of their being. And therefore, it is so hard for them to reach out. It's so hard for them to make those connections and trust after trauma and what they're carrying around. So my goal in my job is to be that leadership where we understand that. Our program is very comprehensive. I'll tell more later as we go. But it really understands intimate partner violence from a trauma-informed perspective, from a veteran-centric perspective, and we are completely recovery-oriented. We believe we can end intimate partner violence. And so I'll tell you more about it as we go.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Jillian?
Okay. Hi, Jillian Bullock. When I was 11 years old, I was sexually assaulted, raped by a family friend. And at that time, I didn't know how to process it, being a young girl. So I came into myself through writing. I always wanted to be a writer, and I wrote stories about different things, and that helped me overcome a lot of the depression that I had and everything about being sexually assaulted, being raped. And so later on, I said, okay, at 12, I said, I'm going to start taking martial arts. I said, I'm never going to be a victim again. This was my mindset. I said, I'm never going to be a victim again, and I started taking martial arts. And got really good, became a black belt. Then I went to another style, became a black belt in Taekwondo and Wing Chun. And then that just fueled my interest to help other females, girls, and women. I became an advocate for them as I got older. I started a program called Fighting Spirit Warriors, which is a self-defense program for females. I'm actually on tour right now. We started this month because it's Domestic Violence Month. I also teach females about safety and preventive measures, you know, how not to become a victim, how to see the signs before it even happens, and how to protect themselves that way. Because the last thing I want females to have to do is to fight if they don't have to. If they can avoid it, you know. So my training as a martial artist, I'm a mixed martial arts fighter. So that gives me a lot of, you know, knowledge to be able to really have techniques that will help females to be able to defend themselves in 3 easy moves in order to get away from an attacker or abuser. I do a lot of coaching. I'm a life coach as well. So I do a lot of coaching. Again, my thing is to try to help females not even get into that predicament in the first place, so they don't have to fight. They don't have to try to get out of it. Also, as a filmmaker, I always do films that I think will impact people's lives, entertaining but educational at the same time. I got my start. I went to college, went to LaSalle University, got a degree there, and then I got my feet wet in the film industry, working on Malcolm X with Spike Lee and Denzel Washington. Very good experience there. Learned a lot there. And then I just worked on other people's projects. But then I wanted to branch off and do my own thing, so I can have, you know, more of the control as a writer, director, producer. You have more control over that. So this movie here, Sense of Purpose, came about because about 4 years ago, I was looking for a new project to do, new project to write, and I started interviewing a lot of veterans who actually use mixed martial arts as a way to cope with PTSD. That's how it started out, because since I'm a mixed martial arts fighter, I said, well, that'd be really cool to learn. But as I got into interviewing hundreds and hundreds of veterans, I found out that a lot of them had PTSD because they had been sexually assaulted, men and women. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, that seems like a more interesting story to tell. So then I redirected and started rewriting. And it was very painful to hear a lot of the stories. And the reason why they opened up to me and told their story, because I am a veteran, and they said, well, you may not have been sexually assaulted in the military, but you understand because you're, you know, my brother or sister in arms. You understand what what we deal with in the military. So they opened up, and I learned a lot, and I started writing. So the story is inspired by true events. I took a lot of different parts of people and put them all together. And we go around now, and the film is done, we go around to different veterans groups, and I give speeches about it and everything. And we only show parts of it because we know a lot of the part of the movie can trigger veterans, so we're very sensitive to what we show and what we do not show to the veterans groups. So that's our mission. And like I said, the movie will be out next year, so we hope to get more awareness out, and hopefully change can happen.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing. And last but not least, Cynthia.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. And awesome, Mr. Caldwell, for putting this whole event together, and your team. So can we get him a round of applause?
For them, yeah, you got it.
Well, my name is Cynthia Walker. I'm the founder and executive director and also certified domestic violence advocate. Sophia was a vision I had. There was a young lady named Monica Paul that was gunned down at the YMCA in Montclair, and I met her mother at a township meeting, and she shared with me there wasn't enough resources for domestic violence victims. And immediately I went home, I thought about it, and I said, I don't have any more small children, so, I could do this. I have the time, and I always wanted to start a domestic violence or some type of organization that would help troubled teens, domestic violence victims, and we just jumped in full force, and we promote awareness, prevention, healing, and education. Education is key. We pride ourselves on our safe dating presentations. We go out, we talk to our youth. Our focus is to break the cycle at a young age. That way they will grow into well-meaning adults. And this is how we believe that we will be able to eradicate domestic violence. And I'm proud to say we've served over 3,000 young people this year alone, and over 12,000 since our inception. So if you would like to contact us, we will come out, we will do a safe dating presentation, we'll come to the schools, the colleges, the youth groups. Just give us a call, and we will have our safe dating team out to you to present to your teens or your young adults. We're focused on solutions and not statistics. So that's where we're going. It's really not much more I can say,
that's
except
perfect.
train yourselves to be a good listener. Everyone needs to be heard if they have experienced any type of trauma. I've always been a good listener, and we're just asking for more people to come on board, to get involved, become an advocate, and help the community. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks all the panelists. So what I want to do, and I'd like the audience to think about some questions you may have, because we'll open up. I have a series of questions. But I want to start out, and we'll just have a couple of you answer. We don't have to go down the row again. This is one of the most heinous acts you can do against another. Why is this such a big problem? What is causing this domestic violence in every aspect of society? Can someone take that? It's really become an epidemic. Why? Why is that? Yeah, Cynthia.
I believe that as a young age, young boys are taught to be the man, to take responsibility of the household if the father isn't there. Toughen up. Don't show your emotions. At that point, we take on this responsibility of our families, and I believe that I was born in the 60s, 1964. My household was very violent. My father and my mother, they were arguing. They never put their hands on each other, but it took an effect on me, which made me a quiet person, a listener. But I believe that, we have to break the cycle. If you're growing up in a domestic violence household, you're going to bring that into your adulthood because you believe that is normal. That's why we believe we need to educate our youth. But it's a learned behavior, flat out, just like racism is.
Is it, and I'll ask some others, is it influenced by what we see on TV, we see in the internet? Does that influence it, or does that have any role at all?
Everything influences it. You don't know what bad habits or good habits you're going to pick up along the way. It's up to the individual. So, you know, when we recognize this, especially these signs in our children, it's important that we get them help. If you know that your child is a bully, address it. You know, I was constantly called up to Montclair High. Oh, my daughter's being suspended. She's going to throw the teacher out the window. And I would sit in the office and say, how can you help me? I never went in there and said, my daughter didn't do that. I knew my daughter was a bully. And, you know, they never had any words for me. You know, so we got counseling outside of the high school. You know, I went and got counseling, but it is a learned behavior. The abusive ways that people portray and how they have their effects on the victims. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
But let me ask Ron, as someone, what advice do you give to people who have this tendency to have the self-pity, to kind of to go into themselves and to not want to talk to anybody or share anything? What would you say to someone who's dealing with it, who just doesn't want the world to know?
Well, I mean, and I want to touch on that too with the emotional part of it, what she said, because one of the most interesting things I learned from this journey that I've done is, you touched on it, said, guys, we're taught not to show our emotions. When I go and I ask people to sign these boards, when I know the difference between when I run into a male or female, what's going to happen. And the most interesting thing I ran into was in San Diego. There were 5 couples there, and they were millennials, which is important from what I'm going to tell you guys. But these 5 couples, guy, girl, guy, girl, guy, girl, I told them my story and said, yeah, if you want to share anything you want, it's your board. And 9 people signed. There was 1 guy that wouldn't sign. And I sat back and watched the dynamics of this group work. And normally I would have stepped in, but 1 guy said, I don't want to sign. And usually I've learned on this journey, if it comes down to it, it's male, female, the male will say, she'll sign for me. And I started seeing this so many hundreds of times, and I thought, why? It's because guys have tough time sharing their emotions, because you're right, they're taught at an early age. But in this situation with this group, this group took ownership, and they said, no, you're going to sign or we're not going to leave. And part of me didn't like that, because I don't want this guy to be forced to put something on a board with these Sharpie markers. But the group thought it was important, so I thought, let's see what this group does. And they said, we're not going to leave. But what was really interesting is, before the guy signed, he said, he didn't just say, okay, I'll sign the board. He said, okay, I'll sign the board. And I caught that. He deepened his voice. He was almost like the Lion King. He had a roar to let everybody know, I'm still a man. And I thought, these women probably think you're more of a man because you're going to sign this board and show your emotions. It's okay. I mean, for gosh sakes, I mean, I'm sitting here telling you what happened to me, but I see that. And so it is important to start letting guys know it's okay to start showing who you are. I mean, you know, John Wayne was a cool guy, and Marlboro Man was a cool guy, but, you know, that's the days past. Let's move forward with what's today. And like I said, the important part is these are millennials that I talk to, and so they're starting to realize those other guys said it is important. So I wanted to address that. I see that a lot in this journey.
And also, I was a single parent. I raised 2 sons, and it starts in the household. It starts how you talk to your boys. And I made them know that they could talk to me about anything, and they could share their emotions. And at times they have to be tough, but at times you need to cry, you can cry. And I also really instilled in them, which a lot of parents unfortunately don't do. I go talk to parents groups, and usually they say, well, can you help me with my child? And I say, well, I have to deprogram you first, because you're the one that's why the kid is screwing up. Because if I go to my sons and I say, listen, this is the way you respect a woman, this is the way you treat a woman, this is the way you treat your girlfriend. If you want to, you know, when they're young, you start them up young. They don't have a girlfriend yet, but I'm saying when you get one. And the thing that I said to my sons, I said, don't you ever put your hand on a woman, or I will whip your ass. No, literally, I will whip your ass. This is what I said to them. I said, there is no reason for you to ever put your hand on a female. I said, now, obviously, if she's coming at you with a weapon or something, you got to try to get the weapon out. But I said, you're going to deal with me. And most parents don't do that. They don't hold their sons accountable for their actions. If acting out, or they're being angry, having angry. Well, you need to address that as soon as that kid throws something or bites a kid or punches another child. You need to address it early on so it doesn't develop into an issue, into a problem.
Right.
But I usually have to deprogram the parents first and show them where they're screwing up, unfortunately, before I can get to the reason what the children are doing.
It's a product of influence. So Dr. Bruce, before you, do we know what percent, because we're talking, it's a human problem. It's not just a women's problem. Do we know what percentage of men have experienced this? Do you have anybody have any idea what percentage?
I can say that what we're finding in the general population, it looks like about 25% of women are experience intimate partner violence, with about maybe 15% men.
Wow.
But when we're looking in the veteran population, and there's very small research studies and small targeted groups that we're pulling this information from. But there is some indication that that could be twice as much in the veteran population to both use and experience. You'll not hear me, in our task force recommendations that came out in 2012 that established our program, I think they used a lot of wisdom in working with this particular population. I just want to create some caveats here that we try really hard not to use the word batter or perpetrator, victim, and those labels. We really are very person-centered. So we're looking at the behavior that is resulting from trauma and so forth. Now, that is not to say that we don't have some situations that are very traditional, power and control and things like that. But for the most part, what we're seeing is a progressive breakdown of the individual. And we've always all heard the term hurt people hurt people. They've been hurt. They've been hurt by the military. They've been hurt by betrayal, sometimes from their own commands or their own units. They've been hurt through military sexual trauma. They've been hurt through what they have seen, and that has broken them again at their core. And they come home. They've been gone so many times. You think about our most recent conflicts, where we have people that have been gone away from their families more than they've been home in long periods of time. And so that breaks down the core of the relationship. It breaks down trust. They lose their ability to trust. So just a different way of looking at things to answer your original question about why. There's so many reasons. There's societal reasons. There's poverty. There's social, economic reasons. There's culture. Like you said, being brought up in a home where this seems normal. But then there's also, when we're talking about invisible wounds and we're talking about trauma, what trauma does to the core of the person and their ability to connect with others, to believe those other people will be there, and how closely related this is to suicide prevention and suicide and homicide. We've all heard of the horrific stories in veterans where there's been intimate partner violence that has resulted in suicide, homicide, or annihilation of the whole family. And so it is prevalent, and in our particular situation, we see a progression of a brokenness in the relationship and that lack of trust related to trauma. And it starts with just conflict, and then it progresses to verbal abuse. And one of the things we do a lot of is trying to educate everyone across our system, veterans, family members, and our staff, about what intimate partner really is and the scope of it, that it starts there with verbal and emotional abuse and it progresses. It doesn't start with physical abuse, but that's what everybody wants to think about. So we do a lot of education, as both of you were mentioning.
Can you, one thing, I've done a lot of research around neuroscience and trauma. We'll talk a little bit about that in the urban panel. That the amygdala changes because of trauma, and so people react differently. It's like broken emotions. Anybody can talk to that? And what people have found is the research is showing things like mindfulness actually help to change the brain back. Has mindfulness been used in domestic violence recovery? Can anybody talk to that?
We have a program. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
We have a program at the Sophia, one of our community partners, that just brought the mindfulness program in last year. So we're looking forward to participating, but I do know that the mindfulness program was serving all of the children in our area. So, it's very important that we start early with our children. We will also be contacting the mindfulness program for the ladies that participate in our support group and the victims in domestic violence survivors that we serve. So I'm just learning about mindfulness myself just last year, so I'm still researching And I do see a difference in the children when they come out of the classroom. So that's actually on my plate to do a little more research in. But it is an awesome program. I see how it affects the children in a positive way. So if anyone else knows about it, please share with us.
And one of the things, and again, as I said, I have a series of other questions, but I want to make sure we're answering what the audience wants to answer questions the audience wants to hear. How do we, you know, part of the reason we're doing this conference is to let the world know that if you've experienced any of these traumas, you're not alone. You know, what are some of the things you're doing? Ron, you're traveling the country, you're doing that. What are some of the things we're doing to get the word out that if you've experienced this, it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to, whether you're a man or a woman, what are some of the things that are going on to help publicize that this is a common challenge?
The way I do it is, like I said,
well, obviously the film is wonderful. Yeah,
I tour the country, and I try to do, like I said, the last thing is the self-defense. I want to do the mindfulness, like you were saying. You do the programs of how not to get into this predicament, and if you're having issues yourself, how can we help you heal first? And then, but it's a lot of steps to that, because they are wounded, emotionally, mentally, they're wounded. So the programs that I try to do is, like I said, safety and preventive measurements, and then also how to spot. I do how to spot a domestic abuser. There are ways there are signals that I say you should look for these things, and you mark them off. Okay.
What are one or two of them? What are one or two?
One or two. If you meet a guy on the first date, and the first thing he does is he starts, coming on too strong. Like your second date, he done gave you a diamond bracelet. Red flag. Red flag. Red flag. Don't get caught up in the fact that, oh, that's nice. And so
just take the bracelet and don't call back.
No, don't take the bracelet. Don't take the bracelet. Don't take the bracelet. And just giving away too much information. Don't let them pick you up where you live. Don't let them pick you up. Meet outside somewhere. Because you don't know this guy. You don't know if he's a serial killer. You don't know if he's a domestic violence. You don't know anything about this guy. So you do preventive steps. And if you see any kind of, like if he asks too much about your children, or he's asking you too much about how he wants to, get married the next day. You only had 2 dates. I want to get married. It may seem like it's nothing, but these are signs that I've found from interviewing hundreds and hundreds of women who have been in domestic violence. These are things they said, and I said, oh, you didn't see these signs.
And the signs of control, too. Control, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? Those kinds of things, okay.
They're calling you, and they say, oh, I'm on the phone with a friend from work. Is that a guy? What guy? That stuff, you see that first off? Yeah, first 30 days, I tell a woman, don't even let the guy know where you work or where you live, the first 30 days. So I definitely say, don't be quick to jump into bed with them or do anything like that with them. You have to take your time and really get to know
What does Steve Harvey say? He says, what, the 90-day rule?
90-day rule.
90-day rule.
90-day rule, right. He's saying that for a different reason. I'm saying it for safety reasons.
Exactly, not safety.
For safety
Dr. Bruce, you had a comment.
I just wanted to mention it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we have a campaign going out through the whole VA system. All of our intimate partner violence coordinators at all of our medical centers are promoting this, and it's a pledge to screen and a pledge to intervene. So we have two campaigns. One is to educate medical staff. The medical community is really poised at the right place to help to screen and intervene for those who are experiencing intimate partner violence, male and female. So we're really educating our women's health clinics. Most of our women's health clinics are already screening in a routine way and have intervention protocol that they follow to make sure that if someone is in danger, that we're doing safety planning right then and getting them, partnering with the community to get them the care that they need and so forth. The other side of that is pledge to intervene. So I really like this because it really lays the onus on everyone to get involved. If you see signs, if someone says something to you, to know that we do have an intimate partner violence coordinator and resources, and we're there to help, and we do understand how this can happen. And our goal too is to get involved early when there's some relationship issues. So we partner with a lot of internal mental health groups that we have, family care groups that we have. Our chaplains have a Warrior to Soulmate program. So if it's not a risky situation, we can channel people in to get some help to preserve those relationships when they're healthy enough to preserve. And so those campaigns are going out nationally from the top down and across the country, and we hope that will really help. And the other thing is, again, to really educate staff members that we know that with with the statistics of 25% at the very least of people impacted by intimate partner violence, our staff is impacted as well.
Absolutely.
And what that does to them to be able to come to work and take care of veterans and patients and so forth. So we have programs to reach out to them as well.
Excellent. And I didn't mention, and that's one of the main reasons we're doing the conference this month, is because this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Yes. And so we thought what better time to start this conference than to do it around this and kind of take it to the next level with a number of different traumas. Yeah. And so Ron, you've traveled the country. You've seen a lot of people write some very personal things. What have you learned from that? Are there messages, are there patterns that you've seen as you talk? And you have just an amazing focus group. And what information can you share with us from what you've read?
Yeah, and that's why I said it's amazing you guys are going to listen to me, because you're not really listening to me, you're listening to tens of thousands of people, and that's something absolutely unexpected. But yeah, as I went on this journey, more and more people started opening up. I always give people a slip of paper and say, hey, you can follow my journey on social media. And I always tell people too, and like I said to some of the ladies I met earlier and we talked a little bit, please feel free to contact me if you guys ever need anything. And I tell people this. And I mean, sometimes like a group in El Paso just got a hold of me and said, hey, you said, contact you. And they got a hold of me because they knew I lived in Phoenix and they were coming. And for me, that's important though, because they're remembering my story, they're remembering me, and they contact me. But there are a lot of people that will contact me and say, hey, where did you go to get help? And this might be 2 months later. And I'm thinking, wow, they contacted me. But the thing is, I opened up this dialogue with them, and then they'll contact me and say, well, where did you go get help? What are you doing now? Well, this is my therapy now. But I used to go to a psychiatrist. I used to go to this and that and the other. And then there was even a documentary that came out about my story. And what I liked about what they did at the very beginning of it is they put Flight of the Bumblebee by Rimsky-Korsakov. Because I told the group, the journalists, I said, I felt like a bumblebee. I'm always bouncing around, trying to find the right help, you guys. Like a lot of you guys are people that help people. But I had to find the right counselor, the right therapist, the right doctor. You think that's easy? It's not. And you will bounce. And people tell me this all the time. They said, I'm glad when they saw the documentary that that's what you said to these journalists, because people feel that way. They don't know where to start. Right. And even if you do know, quote unquote, where to start, you don't know who to trust. And you have to find that trust. So for me, in the weirdest sense, I learned to trust you guys, people out there. And I mean, they're all around you. And then the other thing I learned is, I'll just give you this powerful story. I was at Arizona State University, walked up to two ladies. They're both freshmen. And I'm at a coffee shop. It's a Starbucks in Arizona State University. And they signed the boards. They heard my story. They hugged me. They said, wow. And I went to the back of the coffee shop. And as I was getting ready to leave, one of the ladies said, can you come here? And I came over there and I sat next to her and she said, I have to tell you something. And she said, and I have to tell my best friend sitting across from you something. She said, I was raped. And she said, it happened about 3 months ago. And her best friend didn't even know. Wow. It gets even more powerful. Her best friend then stood up and said, I want to tell both of you something. She said, I was raped a month ago.
Oh, boy.
These are two best friends sitting there. So what am I learning? This happens not to that level, but I'm starting to learn from people. They have a story to tell. And you were given some statistics about domestic violence and sexual assault. It's out there. It blows my mind. Like, even when I look at all you guys here, you guys have stories. And the thing is, I'm going to go out later today, tomorrow, and meet people in this area, and I'm going to uncover more stories. The power of all of us here, we can uncover stories. I'm not a professional, you guys, but I feel like I've become an expert on being human. I can go out. So I'm not a doctor, and I respect everything about you and all you guys, but I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a professional, but I feel like I'm an expert on being a human being. You guys have taught me that, but I've learned that a lot of people have these stories out there. They just need somebody else to be vulnerable, and then they'll start sharing back. That story at Arizona State University blew my mind, though. I had to go home and relax after that because I just thought, but it was powerful in the sense that those two women started healing. And they hugged each other and they cried, but I knew they were going to be okay because they could comfort each other. And I said, you can get a hold of me too, because I have a wealth of information. I already got a bunch of business cards from a lot of you guys, so I'm going to start handing out resources from the Jersey area and Wonderful. New York. That's so cool, you guys.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Ron, for what you're doing, what you're all doing. And so we have a few more minutes. As someone who I'm president of the New Brunswick Board of Education, we have a couple of people here, but more importantly, I have a 13-year-old daughter. And I have a lot of friends, women who've gone out with guys where it's not been physical violence, but it's been emotional violence. Yeah. And that, you know, the controlling, a friend of mine's getting divorced now, just have gone through, this guy was just totally controlling. And everybody, all her friends knew this guy is going to be a problem. It's just a matter of time. How do you talk to people? How do you warn people in school or so on, you know, this guy's bad news, or this gal's bad news, or, you know, what's your advice for young people? We have some young people here. What do you say to them?
It comes back again to parenting.
Mm-hmm.
It comes back.
But sometimes the parents aren't there, and so in urban communities. So if it's not the parent there, how do friends, you know, really, because young people listen to their friends. Right. How do friends tell friends that?
Again, even if it's not the parents and it's friends or somebody in the school, a teacher or somebody that they trust, you want to look for people who have their stuff together. I say have their stuff together, meaning that females who have a good self-esteem and feel great about themselves. They're the ones that they walk different, they talk different, they act different. Like I said, when I started taking martial arts, I started walking different, talking different, and this wasn't the best thing to do, but I'll give you a story real quick. I was in junior high school, and it was a bully. It was a guy who was a bully. He would go around and he would just slap the girls on their butts. That was, to me, sexual assault. To me, that's sexual assault. You don't put your hands on someone. And I was like, wow. And some girls would giggle. Oh, see that? Those are the girls I would talk to. I'm like, that's not funny. He shouldn't put his hands on you like that because that's sexual assault. And they didn't understand it. So you find someone, you know, and then when he did. One day the guy did it to me, and I did a spinning backhand and broke his nose and got suspended. But he stopped doing that. He stopped doing it. I mean, I'm not saying you have to go to violence, but I'm just saying that he did. I had to tell him when I did it, I said, you shouldn't do that. That's sexual assault. You don't put your hands on girls. I still got suspended anyway, even though I was trying to drive home a point. But I went to talk to those girls and said, listen, you have to respect yourself. You can't let guys or anyone disrespect you like that. So you have to find a friend. If you don't have parents, you have to find a friend or someone you trust who will give you that wisdom and that understanding and that support to help that young lady say, okay, you're right. I won't let him do this to me. I won't let him do that to me. And that takes time, and it takes being around the right person to do that, because you're right, it's not always the parent that's going to be there doing that.
Right. Excellent. Do we have any questions? Feel free. You don't have to raise your hand. Just come on up if you want. So you know, as we've talked about a lot of things this morning. Among the challenges is there seems to be an increase in this. There seems to be an increase. There seems to be a trend towards this happening more often, or is it? You know, like police violence, where we have videos now, we're seeing things that have happened all the time. Is there really an increase in society, or are we just learning more about it?
Just learning more about it. Like you said, we have the body cams, and people have cell phones now, and so we get to see it more often, but it's always been bad.
But you're not seeing an actual increase. It's really just kind of an awareness, which is a good thing.
I mean,
actually.
Doing my research, again, like a lot I had to do for the movie, and I had to talk to like hundreds and hundreds of like you know, meeting people like he did and everything. It's been going on in the military. You know, I was in the military in the 80s, and it was going on then. I saw it then when I was serving. You know, how commanding officers would you know, have their will with women or men, whatever they would, and it's the power, it's the control.
Right.
But that was in the 80s when I saw it. It's the same. We just have more documentation and more people coming forward now than they didn't do before, because they were too fearful.
Well, one of the most, if you look at the influence model, one of the things that we find is that we're all products of our influence, and that what we see on TV, what we hear on the radio, what they say about politicians, et cetera, we're influenced by that. And so it's very powerful what you're doing with the film. But that's a very dangerous thing, because people want feel-good things, or things that don't have anything to do with reality. You're hitting reality right on the head. So what's been the reaction of people who've actually seen that film? And you know, because I think that's the only way to really, in a widespread, because you're doing amazing jobs individually with the groups traveling the country, but until you do something on, you know, on screen, it doesn't have as much of an impact. So what's been the reaction?
Well, I mean, some people, like doing the veterans groups, like I said, we show parts of the film, and then they do Q&As. And then they're really supportive, because they want their stories told. You know, we have a guy in the film, his name is Mike Beeson, and it took me about 6 months to talk to him, to let him feel comfortable about, actually he's in the movie sharing his story about being sexually assaulted by his commanding officer. And 20 years later, he says, I still have PTSD. I still have night tremors. I still, you know, sometimes sleep with a gun under my pillow. To me, I'm like, 20 years later, wow. So, you know, I have to tell those type of stories. You know, these are the type of stories as a filmmaker, like I said, it can be entertaining, and there's parts in the movie that are funny and silly and all that. We had to lighten it up some, you know. But the core of it is I need to get people's stories out there because they touch me so deeply that, you know. So I don't care with the military says. I'm not anti-military. I'm a veteran. I'm not anti-military. But I know this is wrong. Our men and women should not be sexually assaulted when they're trying to serve our country.
Exactly.
Shouldn't happen.
So we have a question here.
Hi, my name is Rachel. This question is for Jillian or really anyone who wants to take it. So I'm a college student and I see girls go to parties with the short dresses and the crop tops and everything like that. And I'm just wondering about your preventative measures, considering that's part of our culture. You know, it's not about blaming the victim and asking for it, quote unquote, but I feel like there's a conflict between preventative measures and girls just trying to fit into college. So I wanted to know your perspective on that.
Yeah, like I said, with my program, I do talk to college students, girls. Again, it's the mindset. You have to work with them and try to help the mindset. And like I said, I don't blame them, but I said, listen, preventive measures is if you have a short skirt on, if you have a crop top on, you can wear whatever you want, but guess what? If you're sexually assaulted, it's easier for him to get to you. It's easier for him to get to your body. So if you have more clothes on, it's going to take them longer. And at that time, if you're done my program, you can fight them off. So I say it like that, and they're like, oh, okay, I get it. So you don't want to have the short skirt on. He can go he's right there. So if you have more clothing on, I say it that way, and don't make it seem like it's their fault. And then if I say the clothing part, it takes them longer to get it off of you, to get to where he needs. You can fight them off in that time. Make it hard for them. And then it clicks in their head, oh, that makes sense. So it's all about training, it's education.
And I just want to add, too, with that, which I think is wonderful, to train women to be careful and to protect themselves and what we know is reality, but also to get back to with the younger men and teaching them. You know, it's only half the equation to teach women to protect themselves. We have to take care of the other half of the equation and teach men not to abuse and attack women.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. And we have one more question.
Just briefly, but even like what you're talking about with women dressed that way, after what I went through, it was last summer, I was going to go out. I was excited. I said, all right, I got a bathing suit. And it wasn't board shorts. And I told somebody it was actually like a Speedo. And there were people in the community in the Phoenix area that said, are you sure you want to go out in that? And so it does happen to guys. And that blew my mind. I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, you were sexually assaulted. You're going to go wearing that this summer? And I said, you got to be kidding me. Like, I now know what women, for all these years, you guys have been dealing with. So it's just, when you said that, it was important. But my friend said, no, if you feel comfortable, go out and wear it. But it blew my mind. Now I know what you guys have, like, women have been told. It was mind-blowing for me.
Thanks for sharing. Yes, thank you. Thanks for the question. Good morning.
My name is Brenda Lopez, and I do struggle with PTSD, but it's due to health problems. I have been doing EMDR now for about 2 years, and I am an advocate of EMDR. What is
EMDR is for the
eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing.
Okay, thank you.
That's what it stands for, and I know that I interviewed like at least a dozen therapists before I found one that did do EMDR. And I really believe it works. I am a huge advocate. I know it's used for victims of trauma, police, fire people, and in the military. What has anyone's experience been with EMDR, and is that something that should be more spoken about in terms as in a therapy? Mindfulness is getting all this media and coverage, but EMDR isn't, and it's been around
Good question. Anybody? Have an
I've been
answer?
trained in it, and I've experienced it. So I, as a social worker and a clinician myself, I'm very impressed with the results that I've seen. It is a very extensive training process for a clinician, so it is hard sometimes to find someone who has been certified in EMDR. There's also, I have to put it out there, there's also a question about the evidence-based aspects of it. And in the VA, there's several. It went through the VA and DOD as an accepted evidence-based modality. So we have a lot of people who are trained in it as well. So, but and we won't in the VA generally. We do have some alternative therapies and things like yoga and mindfulness and things like that. But we're really big on evidence-based treatments and things like that. But it really is very effective, especially when used in conjunction with other therapies and things like that. But just to support what you're saying, that it is a very helpful modality for trauma. It's being used now in even other things as well, like addictions and things like that, because it kind of breaks those connections. But thank you for your, I hope I've answered it a little bit. I don't know if anyone else wants to.
Could you just explain a little more about what is it?
Sure.
So we know and it may be helpful.
Dr. Shapiro is the person who promoted it, and like she said, at least 20 years ago. And so it has to do with the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So in one half of the brain, you're kind of storing your memories. The other half, you're storing your feelings. And when you've been overwhelmed by a traumatic experience or ongoing abuse or anything, you kind of break those connections. The feelings and the thoughts and the memories aren't really stored together in a kind of like a computer, like it hasn't processed it. So you just keep reliving it over and over and over. When triggers happen, you just right there again, and so forth. So it actually uses bilateral movement, eye movement. It's called eye movement. It's where it started, but now they have like tappers and different things to engage both halves of the brain to kind of go ahead and reprocess all of that so that you can kind of put it away for good. And you'll still have the memories, and you'll still be sad about it, or you'll still remember like a human being would, the anger or the pain, or but it doesn't take over your life. It helps you re-engage that and reestablish the sense of safety in the present. So it is very helpful.
Excellent. Great. Any other questions? I think we're at time. This has been a wonderful discussion, and we thank you for sharing some very powerful things. Let's give them a round of applause.